Hey, y'all, this is Jeff Foxworthy, and you're listening to The Barn.
Hi, and welcome to The Barn, live from The Barn studio with The Tippy Joe Show and Pop Punk Pizza Party Podcast. We are joined today with a special guest online, a comedy legend, Mr. Jeff Foxworthy. Jeff, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Y'all need to raise the bar about who you'll let into the barn. You do know that, right?
Well, we got chickens in here. We got cows. So you probably fit right in.
I was going to say, I feel right at home then.
We are excited you're coming into town for a special event, an evening with Jeff Foxworthy live at the Black River Coliseum in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, Sunday, April 7th at 8 p.m. Doors are at 7. We're looking forward to having you back in town. Heard that maybe you were even maybe the first artist to play the Black River Coliseum, maybe back in the 90s. Is that right?
I think that is correct. I think I was the... Well, we took its virginity. Let's just put it that way. All right.
And it's a special event because actually the day after is the solar eclipse that happens, once every week, I guess. No, not all that often. So, yeah, that's an exciting time.
No, I think that's really cool. So, and like you guys are supposed to be like one of the best places to view it, right?
Yeah, we are really lucky. So we just had one, in 2017, I think, right, guys?
Yeah.
And it's sort of, we are at the very cross of those two. So in 2017, we had full eclipse. What do they call it? Full, whatever it's called, sciencey things. And this time around, yeah, it's the same thing.
Whatever sciencey thing. I love that. Yeah.
Are you, have you experienced one before?
No, I have not. Though I used to tell people that my legs were so white at the end of winter that you could only look at them through a special box you made in science class. But
that is too funny. Obviously, stand-up comedian, been doing comedy for a number of years, actor, game show host, all these different things. Is stand-up comedy really your true love and your true passion other than, obvious things like family and faith?
Yeah, I think I'm one of the stranger ones. Most people get into stand-up because it's like it's a great springboard to do TV and movies and things like that, which is kind of what their goal is. And I got lucky and ended up doing some TV and movies and stuff. But to me, from the day I ever started, stand-up was the top of the mountain. And I enjoy doing that other stuff. Creatively, it's something different. But even now, after 40 years, if you put a gun to my head and said, hey, you can't do but one thing, I wouldn't even have to think about it. Be like, okay, stand up. It's just always been my fave.
So a little bit about that with like what Chad talked about, like the things you love. So two of the things you love most kind of happened around the same time, right? Like you met your wife around the same time you started your comedy career, correct?
Kind of around the same time. It was about 3 minutes apart, which is the truth. I was working at IBM, and a bunch of guys I worked with entered me in a comedy competition in Atlanta. And it wasn't like an amateur night thing. It was working comedians. Oh, dadgum, I better write some material. And so my wife used to act, and she had just filmed a thing with a guy that was a comic. And so she went down with a group of people to root for him in this contest, and somehow I won the contest. I beat her friend, and so when I came off stage, she came up to tell me congratulations, and so I literally met my career and met my wife 3 minutes apart.
That is insane.
That's incredible.
And it's just crazy. And thank God I met her then, because I had a really good job, and nobody else was saying, oh, you should quit IBM and be a comic. But I guess because she was creative and in that field, like when we started dating, she was the only person saying to me, if you spend the rest of your life in a cubicle, you're going to be miserable. You've got way too much creativity. You need to quit your job and at least try this. And it was probably only because of her nudging that I even considered it. And so, yeah, I may be getting my gold watch from IBM now instead of, and I really didn't, I didn't, sometimes ignorance is bliss. In my case, most of my life has been ignorance, but I didn't I didn't think it would work necessarily, but I was sitting in the break room, and when I was kind of contemplating it, and these, I'm 24, and there's three guys in there in their 60s, and one of them was going, man, I wish I'd had a hardware store. I think I would have loved to have run a hardware store. And another guy was like, man, I wish I'd have done that. And I thought, oh, my word, I don't want to be sitting in this break room 40 years from now going, I wish I had tried to be a comedian. Mm-hmm. And so I thought maybe I could get away with it for a couple of years, and then I'd come back with my hat in my hand and beg for my job back. And, somehow a couple of years has turned into 40. So that's awesome.
So I've heard you say that whenever you decided to quit your job and do the full-time comedy that your mom asked, are you on the dope?
Oh, the dope, whatever the dope is. And that was her first question. Are you on the dope? We have money. We can get you help. And I'm like, no. I'm like, I just think I can do this, Mom. I'm loving doing comedy, and I think I can do it. Of course, 5 years later, I'm on Johnny Carson, and she's like, you just wasted all those years at IBM. And I'm like, okay, whatever,
That's what I was going to ask is what was their reaction once your career started kind of taking off?
Oh, well, then they thought that I always should have been doing this. But, seriously, and you guys probably know it from radio. When you grow up in a total blue-collar environment, you don't think about having a job doing something creative. It's something other people do. And so it never, even as big a fan of comedy as I was, it never occurred to me that might be a possible occupation for me.
Now, Jeff, how did you get started involved in performing and everything? Did you start writing out scripts, or did you start just kind of winging it, doing improv stuff? And with that process, do you prefer creating, or is touring kind of more of your thing? What do you prefer in all of this?
Well, at the end of the day, most comedians you're a writer. Because people think, well, you can just go up there and wing it. Well, you can't go up there and wing it for 90 minutes, And so you kind of learn to grab ideas and write them down. And being a writer is never fun, but you have to have a place to start. And it's funny, forever people have asked me, do you practice in front of the mirror? Well, I've never thought about what it looks like. It's to me, it's like, what am I going to talk about? And kind of, I was lucky. I found out early what worked best for me. And that was, I just trusted, hey, if I think something, or my wife says something, or my family does something, there's other people out there thinking and saying and doing the same things. I just trusted that. And that's kind of where my comedy evolves from. Somebody in my family will do or say something stupid, and I'm like, I bet other families are doing this, and it's, thank God it worked.
With your level of stardom playing, arenas and theaters, how do you, a lot of times you hear stand-up comedians, they'll go work out things in the clubs, and then they'll take it to a larger scale, or with your Netflix special and your specials that you air, how do you work out your material?
Oh, I always go back to little clubs, and I don't even want to go on a Saturday night, because those audiences are too generous. I want to go on a Tuesday night when there's 30 people there. And other comics laugh at me, but this is the way I do it. So I'll have ideas on note cards, and I bring a little table with 3 boxes, and the boxes are labeled gold, silver, and certificate of appearance. And I'll just get up there, and because 20 or 30 people, they'll be honest with you. If it's not funny, they'll tell you. And so if it gets a great laugh, I'll put it in gold. If it needs work, I put it in silver. And if it just totally bombs, I put it in certificate of appearance. And usually when I hit a certificate of appearance, the only person laughing is my wife, because she loves it when I throw something out there and it just bombs. The whole way home, she's like, nobody laughed at that. That was so awesome.
Is it weird for you, some jokes that land and some that don't? When you write them, do you think, oh, this is going to be great, and then you put them in front of a stage and in front of an audience, and they just fall really flat?
In a very weird way, that's kind of what keeps me so attracted to stand up, meaning any other job, if you lay carpet for 40 years, you know what to do when you get to the corner. You know how to do the stairs. I mean, and with comedy, you never get to the point. I mean, after all these records and all these specials and all these tours, I still don't know what people are going to laugh at. And so, but that's what makes it interesting to me in a weird way. I'm like, so sometimes I'll think of something and I go, oh, people are going to be beating the tables over this. And I go up there and I throw it out and it's crickets. It's like, and I'm like, really? That's not funny. And sometimes I have an idea that I almost don't try. I'm just like, this is just stupid. And you go out there and say it and people are snotting on themselves. And you're like, oh, really? Okay. But I always feel like the audience is right. I mean, and at this point, if something bombs, I'm like, do you not understand what I'm talking about here? Or did I not explain it well enough? And they're like, no, it's just not funny. But that's kind of what makes it feel fascinating. It's kind of like being with a woman that you can't quite figure out. That it makes it interesting because, yeah, you never get it to be an expert at it.
Is there different, if you go to, let's say, New York versus Los Angeles, or is there different jokes that hit well in other locations versus other ones? Or is it generally like, anywhere you go, you kind of get the same response with every joke?
Well, you have to consider the subject matter. Like I remember very early on, a comic from New York was playing in Atlanta and he was doing subway material and nobody was laughing. And he came off stage and he goes, these people in Atlanta are just stupid. And I said, well, they're not really stupid. We don't have subways. So, I can't necessarily go to New York or LA and do material about bow hunting because nobody bow hunts out there. But you're always kind of wherever you're at, you're looking at what connects us? What do we have in common? And that's kind of the way I view it. But at the end of the day, I also believe funny is funny. It doesn't matter where you're at. If funny, it's funny.
So you talk about that funny being funny. I know as a kid, you talk about you would memorize comedy albums and then go to school and tell those jokes. Did you have kind of your go-to albums that you would use for that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a shame you can't even bring his name up anymore. But I was a huge Cosby fan as a kid. Yeah, because he was really funny and he talked about family and he worked clean and he had all those different voices and he could use a microphone so well. But I also listened to Jerry Clower and Flip Wilson and Bob Newhart, and I kind of am of the theory that every comic. We're a little bit we're kind of like magpies. We just sit up there on the limb and we kind of watch the world. And when we see something we like, we go and take it. So I think we're probably all influenced by the comics we grew up watching. Because I have young comics say that to me today. They're like, oh man, I watched you and I was like trying to be like you, and which is very humbling. But, the best way to be is don't try to be somebody else. Just be you.
Who's someone that you enjoy watching that's kind of up and coming, and who's someone that you would, of all time, you would wish you could have worked with?
Oh, wow. Well, like it was fun for me like a decade ago watching Nate Bargatze, and I was like, this kid's going to be big. He's just different. He's unique. But it's kind of the same thing with Leanne Morgan. Dusty Slade really makes me laugh. Those are some of them now. But kind of the fun thing for doing this for a long time is I started out as a fan. I was a fan of stand-up comedy when I got into it. And then for like your first decade in it, you're trying so hard to, rise up out of the pack that you're probably hypercritical of other comics. And now it's come back around where I can just watch new people and go, oh man, she's funny or he's funnier. And I'm back to being a fan of it again. And it's almost like being in a real relay race and, turning around and handing the baton to the one behind you. Because I remember being on the other end of that. I remember, 35 years ago being in LA and Buddy Hackett knowing who I was and telling me, "Oh, I think you're funny," and you're like, "Oh, holy cow! Wow, really?" And so I like to give that encouragement to young comics now.
Where do you feel like the state of comedy is right now? Because to me, it seems like it's just as popular as ever. And we kind of mentioned Netflix and YouTube, and maybe it's because of some of those things, or even, a lot of comics have podcasts and they have other areas that they're able to explore. Where do you think the state of comedy is right now?
I finally think the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way. We went through a period of where, even for me, like I'm not mean-spirited. So anytime that I was ever coming up with new material, I didn't think about it. The whole goal was to make people laugh. And then we hit a stretch where you got scared to say anything because people were going to cancel you over anything. And I found myself writing and then editing and then writing and then editing. And finally, one day I went, this is BS. As a comic, we've got to be truth tellers. We got to say, why do we do this? And how come people do that? And why do men do? And so I'm just like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think the pendulum is, people are like, kind of have dug their heels in and said, enough. No, we're not. Because what we've got to do, we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves. And I think we hit a period where people had no sense of humor about themselves. They just had to be right. And when you have to be right, that means whoever you're talking to has to be wrong. And, you just get defensive. They get defensive. There's no humor in that. And human beings, we're all idiots. I'm 2 decisions from drywalling. That's what I should be doing for a living.
Same.
Yeah. And everybody's family's crazy. And, nobody has life figured out. I mean, all of us, even to this day, every day you're coming to a fork of the road and guessing left or right. You don't have it figured out. And so we need to be able to laugh at ourselves, because I think, bizarre way, it makes us be kinder to others. We don't have to be right. You're just we're all idiots. It's okay.
I know a lot of your comedy comes from just looking at your own family and stuff like that. Has anybody else in the family at any point showed any interest in getting into the comedy career?
No, my youngest daughter, see, because I do believe it's kind of a gift from God to be able to do this. Like, I don't know why I can do it. I can't organize a garage, but I can sit down and write jokes. But my youngest daughter has always been really funny. I mean, from the time she was 2, but she's a mom, she has no interest in doing it. And I get it. My brother's really funny, but he wouldn't get on stage for $1 billion. He'd just be a nervous wreck. So, but both sides of my family are funny. So, like, when we get together for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, there's zero pressure on me, because I'm like the 7th funniest one in the family, so.
And Jeff, with me growing up, I always remember watching you with my brother and everything, and how much fun that was, and all the nostalgia and everything. With your career, what do you think is probably your most, what is your legacy? What are you most proud of throughout your entire career?
Oh, wow. That's a cool question. Nobody's ever asked that. Well, we live in the days where nobody buys records anymore. That's a thing of the past, but they tell me I've sold more comedy records than anybody in history, which, if you look at that, that doesn't make me think I'm the funniest person ever, but it does mean you did it in a way that reached a lot of people. You know what I mean? So you probably couldn't be really dirty, and so it reached a lot of people. But if there was one thing that I look back on that I think people just loved, it was probably the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, because it was so not LA or New York. It was just regular people. And I think to this day, it's still the top show in top rated thing they've ever shown on Comedy Central.
Wow.
And, you know, you kind of look around and go, man, these are just my buddies that I started out with that, you know, we were all playing little bitty clubs, and all of a sudden here we are in arenas. It was just very surreal that it became that popular.
Jeff, we have one fan submitted question for you, and we'll let you get out of here. We know you're a busy man. The girls of the Presbyterian Manor, my mom included, want to know, you know, and you talk about having to be, or maybe turning off the funny when you're with your family, but aside from being with your family, do you always feel pressure to be funny when you meet new people, or when people are excited to see you or run into you on the street? Is there always a pressure there to be funny?
That's a good question. Sometimes, you know, once people get to know you a little bit, but I mean, sometimes I'll say things and people will laugh, and I'm like, well, I wasn't even trying to be funny. You know, I think they give you too much benefit of the doubt there. But I mean, yeah, and people will say to my wife, well, is he always funny? And she's like, no, I mean, he's funny, but there's sometimes he's serious, and there's sometimes he's sad or grumpy. I mean, he's a human being, you know, you go through all of those things, but I'm not one of those. You always hear, well, comedians are laughing on the outside, crying on the inside. I'm not one of those people. I love my life. I love my family. I still love what I get to do. I feel like I'm one of the luckiest people that ever lived, because I made a great living doing something I would have done for free.
We are really excited for Sunday, April 7th at 8 p.m. an evening with Jeff Foxworthy. The Barn will be there live at Black River Coliseum in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And then the day after, the solar eclipse. Jeff, we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on The Barn.
Oh, man, I have so enjoyed this. And you don't have to wear special sunglasses to come see me, okay? So, yeah, you can just show up as you are. But I enjoyed this, guys. Take care, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right, y'all. Take care.